Once upon a time, in Germany, there lived a good king named Leopold and his beautiful queen named Eva. The queen was kind and lovely, and all the people of the realm adored her. The only sadness in the queen's life was that she wished for a child but did not have one. One winter day, the queen was doing needlework while gazing out her window at the new fallen snow. A bird flew by the window, startling the queen, and she pricked her finger. A single drop of blood fell on the snow outside her window. As she looked at the blood on the snow, she said to herself, "Oh, how I wish that I had a daughter that had skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony." Soon after that, the kind king and queen got their wish fulfilled when the queen gave birth to a baby girl who had skin white as snow, lips red as blood, and hair black as ebony. They named the baby princess Snow White. But sadly, the queen died after giving birth to Snow White. Soon after, the king married a new woman named Grimhilde, who was beautiful, but she was equally proud and cruel. She had studied dark magic and owned a magic mirror, of which she would daily ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" Each time this question was asked, the mirror would give the same answer: "Thou, O Queen, art the fairest of all." This pleased the queen greatly, as she knew that her magical mirror could nothing speak but the truth. Meanwhile, Snow White grew up to be a beautiful princess who was kind and gentle and a friend to all animals. As time passed, Snow White grew more and more beautiful, and the evil queen grew more and more envious of her beauty. One day, in the forest, Snow White met a charming prince named Florian. They sang a song of love together and fell in love. One morning, when the queen asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" she was shocked when it answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White is even fairer than you." The queen flew into a jealous rage and ordered her huntsman to take Snow White into the woods to be killed. She demanded that the huntsman return with Snow White's heart as proof and gave him a box to get the heart in it. The poor huntsman took Snow White into the forest, but found himself unable to kill the girl. Instead, he let her go and brought the queen the heart of a wild boar. Snow White was now all alone in the great forest, and she did not know what to do. The trees seemed to whisper to each other, scaring Snow White, who began to run. She ran over sharp stones and through thorns. She ran as far as her feet could carry her. Lost and frightened, Snow White was befriended by woodland animals who led her to a cottage deep in the woods. The princess knocked, but no one was home. She slowly stepped inside. The cottage was a mess. With the help of her forest animals, Snow White cleaned every nook and cranny. "Maybe whoever lives here will let me stay," said Snow White. She saw 7 small chairs in the cottage's dining room. Inside the house, everything was small. There was a little table with 7 little plates. Against the wall, there were 7 little beds, all in a row and covered with quilts. Because she was so hungry, Snow White ate a few vegetables and a little bread from each little plate, and from each cup she drank a bit of milk. Afterward, because she was so tired, she lay down on one of the little beds and fell fast asleep. After dark, the owners of the house returned home. They were the 7 dwarfs: Dopey, Sneezy, Happy, Grumpy, Dog, Bashful, and Sleepy, who mined for gold in the mountains. As soon as they arrived home, they saw that someone had been there, for not everything was in the same order as they had left it. Dopey said, "Who had been sitting in my chair?" Sneezy said, "Who had been eating from my plate?" Happy said, "Who had been eating my bread?" And Grumpy said, "Who had been eating my vegetables?" Dog said, "Who had been eating with my fork?" Bashful said, "Who had been drinking from my cup?" And Sleepy, looking at his bed, found Snow White lying there fast asleep. The 7 dwarfs all came running up, and they cried out with amazement. "Oh, good heaven!" they cried. "This child is beautiful." They were so happy that they did not wake her up, but let her continue to sleep in the bed. The next morning, Snow White woke up, and when she saw the 7 dwarfs, she was frightened. But they were friendly and asked, "What is your name?" "My name is Snow White," she answered. "How did you find your way to our house?" the dwarfs asked further. Then she told them that her stepmother had tried to kill her, that the huntsman had spared her life, and that she had run away from her mother. And the entire day of running through the forest, she finally stumbled upon their house. The dwarfs spoke with each other for a while and then said, "If you will keep house for us and cook, make beds, wash, sew, and knit, and keep everything clean and orderly, then you can stay with us, and you shall have everything that you want." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart," for Snow White greatly enjoyed keeping a tidy home. So Snow White lived happily with the dwarfs. Every morning they went into the mountains looking for gold, and in the evening, when they came back home, Snow White had their meal ready and their house tidy. During the day, the girl was alone, except for the small animals of the forest that she often played with. Now, the evil queen, believing that she had eaten Snow White's heart, could only think that she was again the first and the most beautiful woman of all. She stepped before her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" It answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs is still 1,000 times fairer than you." This startled the queen, for she knew that the mirror did not lie, and she realized that the huntsman had deceived her and that Snow White was still alive. Then she thought and thought again how she could get rid of Snow White. For as long as she was not the most beautiful woman in the entire land, her jealousy would give her no rest. At last, she thought of something. She went into her most secret room. No one else was allowed inside. Enraged, she made a magic potion to change her appearance. Her plan was to trick the princess. Then she made a poisoned apple. From the outside, it was beautiful, and anyone who saw it would want it. But anyone who might eat a little piece of the apple would die. She knew the curse could be broken by love's first kiss. But she was certain Snow White would be buried alive way before that could happen. Coloring her face, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman so that no one would recognize her, and she traveled to the dwarf's house and knocked on the door. Snow White put her head out of the window and said, "I must not let anyone in. The 7 dwarfs have forbidden me to do so." "That is all right with me," answered the peddler woman. "I'll easily get rid of my apples. Here, I'll give you one of them." "No," said Snow White, "I cannot accept anything from strangers." "Are you afraid of poison?" asked the old woman. "Look, I'll cut the apple in two. You eat half, and I shall eat half." Now the apple had been so artfully made that only the one half was poisoned. Snow White longed for the beautiful apple, and when she saw that the peddler woman was eating part of it, she could no longer resist, and she stuck her hand out and took the poisoned half. She barely had a bite in her mouth when she fell to the ground dead. The queen looked at her with an evil stare, laughed loudly, and said, "White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony wood, the dwarfs shall never awaken you When the animals alerted the dwarfs, they came home running and chased the evil queen to the top of a stormy mountain. Suddenly, lightning hit the mountain and the evil queen fell to her death. The dwarfs returned home and found Snow White lying on the ground. She was not breathing at all. She was dead. They lifted her up and looked at her longingly. They talked to her, shook her, and wept over her, but nothing helped. The dear child was dead, and she remained dead. They said, "We cannot bury her in the black earth," and they had a transparent glass coffin made, so she could be seen from all sides. They laid her inside and, with golden letters, wrote on it her name and that she was a princess. Then they put out the coffin on a mountain, and one of them always stayed with it and watched over her. The animals too came and mourned for Snow White. First an owl, then a raven, and finally a dove. Finally, Snow White's Prince Charming arrived. He had been searching everywhere for the beautiful princess he had sung with so long ago. He saw the coffin on the mountain with beautiful Snow White in it, and he read what was written on it with golden letters. Then he said to the dwarfs, "Let me have the coffin. I will give you anything you want for it." But the dwarfs answered, "We will not sell it for all the gold in the world." Then he said, "Then give it to me, for I cannot live without being able to see my Snow White. I will honor her and respect her as my most cherished one." As he spoke, the good dwarfs felt pity for him and gave him the coffin. The prince awakened Snow White with love's first kiss. The spell was broken. "Good heavens! Where am I?" she cried out. The prince said joyfully, "You are with me." He told her what had happened and then said, "I love you more than anything else in the world. Come with me to my father's castle. You shall become my wife." Snow White loved him, and she went with him. Their wedding was planned with great splendor and majesty. The dwarfs were very happy to see their beautiful Snow White happy, and the prince and Snow White lived happily ever after. That was the end of the beautiful Snow White's emotional love story. If you loved the video, please like and subscribe.